Hey everybody, this is Silver Spook, and this is the Silver Spook video about setting your world on fire, the fallout of Twisted Origins, and the problems of radiating youth with colonial education, selling yourself poisonous lies, and how sometimes it all has to burn. Also, Fallout TV show reactions. So, in case you didn't know, there is a new Fallout TV show. There is a new Fallout TV show coming, and that show is coming, I believe, April 12th or April 11th, in early April. So do look out for that. In case you didn't know, but if you haven't seen the trailer, I'm not going to show the trailer. You can go watch it. It just dropped a couple days ago, I think, and so obviously this is kind of like contextualized around. I am a fan of the series. I've played like most of the games up until the 2010s. I haven't played like a lot of the more recent ones. And I was replaying Fallout 1 after watching the trailer. It brings back a lot of the nostalgia for the 90s and the noughties era when I was playing those. And I'm also like working on a lot of different things. I'm working on material for Neofeud 2, the cyberpunk science fictional adventure game sequel to Neofeud 1. And I was thinking a lot about just to give you a little bit of context. So Fallout is a series that takes place in a post-apocalyptic world, very similar to Mad Max or to A Boy and His Dog. Okay, perhaps that's not the most well-known reference. All the sci-fi people probably know that, but it's a Mad Max. There's gonna be a new Mad Max movie too soon that centers on Furiosa. So it's that kind of, for the younger people, it's that kind of world. Or I guess there's a lot of post-apocalyptic media nowadays, so I think it's pretty common. But this is like specifically Fallout is specifically like a very like retro 1950s like ray gun gothic 50s sci-fi inspired franchise. So it kind of the look of the look of the games, and I think there's a TV show as well that it's a smaller fan made TV show. It's very like 1950s retro ray gun gothic. Ray gun gothic is like a term that's sometimes used to describe kind of like 50s 60s era atomic age inspired looks and worlds. So like Fallout is a media franchise, post-apocalyptic role-playing games, later action role-playing games created by Tim Kaine at Interplay. Rip and Interplay. Watching that logo come out when I was replaying this was very much the feels. The series is set during the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd centuries, and it's, I guess, Atom Punk is like more widely understood, I guess, because Wikipedia uses it. Atom Punk retro-futuristic setting and artwork are influenced by the post-war culture of the 1950s United States, with its combination of hope for the promises of technology and the lurking fear of nuclear annihilation. A forerunner of Fallout is Wasteland. If you haven't played Wasteland, it's from 1988, so it might be difficult to get it running on your system. There is a Wasteland 2 and I think Wasteland 3. I haven't kept up with all of that, to be 100. I play games from the 90s with quality of life updates a lot of the time. Wasteland was a 1988 game developed by Interplay, and this is the series' spiritual predecessor. But anyways, just random Fallout trivia aside. So like obviously there's a lot to unpack in this image title and that tweet sentence there. There's a lot going on there. We'll get to it. Um, but like the world of Fallout basically, um, it's hard to talk about this without just like going off into diversions into each one of the favorite things. Like Ron Perlman, Hellboy, Pacific Rim, Hellboy, the very very dickish character in Alien Resurrection. You know Ron Perlman, right? Ron Perlman from Ron Perlman from the Over the Rainbow. What was that? He plays the lion in the We're Not in Kansas Anymore. Dorothy story. Why am I forgetting what the name is? Wizard of Oz. He played a 1980s Wizard of Oz cowardly lion. Ron Perlman narrates Fallout openings. Like I think all of them, possibly all the ones that I've played. And the Fallout openings begin with the intros begin with like war never changes. It's actually really interesting. Let me get that Fallout intro. Yeah, it is war. It is Ron Perlman. Yeah, so the original Fallout intro goes like this. In it, war never changes. The Romans waged war to gather slaves and wealth. Spain built an empire from its lust for gold and territory. Hitler shaped a battered Germany into an economic superpower, but war never changes. In the 21st century, war was still waged over the resources that could be acquired. Where did it go? War was still waged over the resources that could be acquired. Only this time, the spoils of war were also its weapons, petroleum and uranium. For these resources, this is where it gets really interesting. This is the fictional world of Fallout from the 1990s, okay? For these resources, China would invade Alaska, the US would annex Canada, and the European Commonwealth would dissolve into quarreling, bickering nation states, bent on controlling the last remaining resources on Earth. In 2077, the storm of World War had come again. In 2 brief hours, most of the planet was reduced to cinders, and from the ashes of the nuclear devastation, a new civilization would struggle to arise. If you were able to reach relative safety of the large underground vaults, your family was part of that group that entered Vault 13. Imprisoned safely behind the large vault door under a mountain of stone, a generation has lived without knowledge of the outside world. Life in the vault is about to change. So it begins with the main character. Like, well, obviously there's a lot going on there, right? Because Fallout, like, obviously, from the top, it starts with going back into the history. It's the history of the West, right? That I frequently talk about. The Romans waged war to gather slaves and wealth. True. Spain built an empire, or the colonial era, right? The last 500 years, Spain, Britain, France built empires for their lust for. I mean, it's golden territory, which is wealth, and it's all about controlling. It's all about controlling territory. The Spanish, the British, the Romans, the Greeks. They were very similar entities in the world. Hitler shaped battered Germany into an economic superpower. To say nothing of the predecessors that, funded, armed, and worked with Germany to colonize the world, and then fought. It was an inter-imperial struggle, really, between Germany and other colonial powers who had committed far worse crimes with far higher death counts than Germany. 6 million Jews, but 50 million indigenous people, just in Turtle Island. From there are far obviously so there are far worse powers than Germany in that time. But you see how, like, one thing is it's an American game, so it kind of is it can't, if you're releasing during the heyday of the U.S. capitalist planetary superpower hegemony, right? Which far surpasses all the previous, the Romans, the Spanish, and the Germans, right? If you wanted to release a game, I'm saying this, if you wanted to release the game in the 90s, you couldn't say too directly anything about the place you were in, right? You have to kind of generalize it to it's just about war. War is bad, and it's the humanity bad thing, right? Which is a common refrain from people who come from twisted origins or sick places, like I talk about, like the West, just generally, and the United States, obviously. And so, but I think that's like a really interesting like way to start it off, right? It's kind of like this is our history, and this is who we are, and this is what happens, and this is what is kind of inevitable, right? And obviously, it's kind of like on the one hand, it's like it really depends, right? How do you read that story? Is Fallout a cautionary tale about what we should avoid? Is Fallout like a tale of what is inevitable and what is going to come? Is the United States and China are currently in a intense and heating up battle, or a struggle, right? I mean, this is actually happening right now. The United States is trying to is sending weapons and arms to Taiwan, violating one China policy. The United States just this week is further encroaching in the Philippines in the South China Sea, which is the South China Sea, by the way, not the South United States Sea. The United States is banning TikTok. The United States is doing everything to wage full spectrum economic Cold War, heating up to warm war, technological war, soft power war, throwing accusations, right? The United States is doing everything except sending nuclear weapons across the Pacific right now. Everything short of that. And it's also important. The United States has the worst nuclear policy of any place on this planet, right? The Chinese have, speaking of Fallout, the Chinese have a no preemptive nuclear strike. We will not strike first military doctrine. The United States retains we will utilize nuclear ICBMs. We will use any nuclear weapon at any time for any reason to protect our business interests. That's actually like one of the stated reasons. If capital deems nuclear weapon use, right? If launching all the missiles, right, enough to put the entire planet into nuclear winter and kill almost all life on Earth, like 1,000 times over. That's at least how many nuclear weapons are currently exist. If it is deemed beneficial to corrupt business interests, to profiteers, to use nuclear weapons, the United States will use nuclear weapons first at any time. That's the official U.S. stance. It's been that way for the duration of the global Star-Spangled Roman Empire, the United States. So like that. Like this is we are here. Like you were here and now you are here. We are right there. Within 5 years, even by Pentagon estimates, the United States will have no hope of ever catching China in global technological, economic, and full spectrum power. There will be no possibility. We are like at that cusp, right? And so but the thing is, if you read Fallout as inevitable, right? If you read the story of Fallout as this is our human history, and war never changes, and we are humans, right? I'm not saying that's what Tim Kaine and the Fallout designers meant, but like I'm just saying, if you read Fallout as this is who humans are, humans will always fight war. People will always enslave, accumulate wealth at a tiny corrupt minority of people generally. There will always be lust for gold into territory, and humans will always wage these wars over resources, inevitably coming into massive multi-million person killing, planet damaging massive conflagrations. If that is the truth, then the current U.S.-China competition, even Yanis Varoufakis recently just said it's a U.S.-China competition. He's a European. Everybody knows this. Kishore Mahbubani has China won. He is a Singaporean, intermediary between the East and the West, between the U.S. and China historically. And he's got, like, there's many people. Everyone is thinking about this. Everyone is thinking. Nobody can avoid thinking about this. Even if you just use TikTok, if you're a 16-year-old, just trying to, go viral, making videos about, the history of colonialism and also K-pop dances, you can't not think about that, because the U.S.-China competition is resulting in you not having access to one of the most popular and biggest up-and-coming social media platforms. Means of communication is TikTok. So you can't not think about that. Even there's that video of that redneck, like somebody said, like even the redneck bros, there's like a young, he's like about a 16 to 22-year-old white guy from, I think, like Mississippi or Missouri. He has a very strong Southern accent, and he said, they're talking about this China banning, U.S. banning TikToks. I think I'd rather the Chinese government know my address than the U.S. government. And he thinks it. It's like, what does the U.S. government even do, right? And so, anyway, and aside from that, like it is a serious, it's everywhere, right? So everyone is thinking about that. So and anyway, but so because we're at a point where the United States, right, the Chinese are formally the number one enemy in across the board, Democrat and Republican. They must be stopped. The European Union is being pushed by the United States to join with their great fearless star-spangled leaders, who the Europeans gave birth to Americans, so it's really their fault. And so China must be stopped. We have to crush them. We have to technologically stop them. The BYD electric cars are flooding the planet, all their markets. To contrast the in Fallout, it's the Thunderbird, right? The whole world was moving towards Americanization. Now the world is moving towards, oh no, it's being Chineseified. Everyone in Russia, from Russia to Lebanon to Africa, they're all buying Chinese cars. They have Chinese solar panels. There's Chinese energy. There's Chinese social media. There's Chinese BRICS, led economic order. The U.S. dollar, the U.S. military's primacy falling apart. China, we must be stopped. They must be stopped. And whatever we can do to stop them, we have to stop them, including nuclear war. There's articles there are a series of articles coming out that are saying nuclear war is not that bad. Actually 2 years ago when the war started, when the U.S. proxy war with Russia in Ukraine began, there were articles in the New York Times, the Guardian, and the BBC, all in the West, that were saying nuclear war is fine as long as you're not too close to the blast radius. Just duck and cover in your Starbucks and you'll be fine. And these are coming back. There are articles that are saying nuclear war is not that bad. Nuclear war is not that bad, right? Like this is just a random one that I came across, but this is a new narrative the West is saying. Nuclear war is not that bad because the max size of an ICBM equipped with a Russian nuke is 800 kilotons. I calibrated 4 circles around the blast site, and outside the circle means I felt it. I'm sunburnt, but I can walk it up. So the Western narrative is, one of the Western narratives is, if we start nuclear war with Russia and or China, we need to start a nuclear war with China. It's okay because it's just like going out on a sunny day and you forgot your sunblock. I'll just walk it off. When the nukes go off, I'll just take, all you got to do is, go to your yoga class, do a little stretch, grow a sixth finger from the radiation, but that's okay. The sixth finger, you can use that to type. We share on New York Times articles that support continued genocide in the Middle East, as if you're going to be able to do anything there after nuclear war starts. Like when you get radiated, it's fine. when all the water and the food and all the topsoil and you're in nuclear winter, all you got to do is just like exfoliate your skin with some, buy some Sabra aloe vera after sun skin lotion. Just massage that into your ghoul arm. You'll be fine. That's the narrative. I mean, it's literally. It is unbelievable. It is incredible. Especially particularly the imperial liberal classes in New York and London types that write the news articles and set the media for Western controlled media. The Facebooks, the Instagram. They're trying to push. The Instagram just passed a new rule, right? Instagram is trying to stop people from even finding anything about the world, particularly like what's happening in Palestine, which is central to Western, global. Speaking of war, global militarism, imperial hegemony, as new slave market creating, like in Libya, and wealth extracting Roman Empire. Instagram is a digital weapon of modern informational war, and all war. This is like one of the things that's left out in the West, is that all war, including the Romans, used weaponized information and narrative at the highest level. That's the most important tool to make people do things that you want. Right? Simply having weapons doesn't give you an empire. Having weapons can easily devolve into just random, fighting chaotic tribes or chaotic feudal strife, right? To have an empire that has that level of scale and size, where you have all the people moving in one direction for one Caesar, right? It requires informational narrative lying and twisting of the minds of. It's about control of the masses, right? And so the TikTok ban, like the Instagram shadow secret limiting of political content, which basically means if you post about anything positive about China, but especially if you post anything about the Palestine U.S. primary imperial aircraft carrier in West Asia, where 50% of the world's resources is, you will have your account. Any of those posts will instantly be limited, and this is happening across the board. Obviously, if you say anything positive about Palestine, you are getting fired from universities, right? And we can talk. That's there's a whole can of worms to open in that one. But that's the informational component to this war. But then the other side is the normalization of this idea that nuclear war, a war, just as another example, right? NATO, which is the U.S.'s vassal, its weaponization of its own parents, the Europe, the white colonial settler colony empire of the United States is weaponizing its own ancestors, right? The Europeans, destroying them economically and potentially with complete military annihilation if they keep messing with Russia. So NATO is currently, Russia preparing for a wider conflict with NATO. Now Russia doesn't want that, but the French are putting soldiers. The Europeans continue to flood their own soldiers more openly, not just their weapons and funding, but their people going into places like Ukraine. And there are Macron this week was talking about France might have to go to war with Russia, or speaking in ways that are closer and closer to all of Europe trying to fight Russia. Which and Russia has said if they feel existentially threatened, they will use nuclear weapons. Now, even before it becomes nuclear, right? Even before it becomes nuclear, that is very deadly for everyone, the hundreds of millions of people in Europe, and obviously for Russia as well. But for the Europeans, they don't really have anything to send to anyone. But again, remember the United States as a deeply sick, unhealed place, as a twisted place, right? Like all of the West. It doesn't care about European citizens. It doesn't care. Its systems and its ruling classes don't care about Europeans. The business class don't care about Americans, right? They don't care about anything and anyone, right? Except collecting more power and money and controlling the world and being sick, psychopathic, clusters of oligarchic, neo-feudal parasites on the world, right? Who are willing to kill the earth, right? And again, the United States has explicitly said, we will nuke this entire planet. We will kill everything on the face of the earth. We will turn everything into radioactive craters if it benefits our richest billionaires, mostly cis white straight guys. If Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates say, okay, let's just kill everyone on Earth because things are it's better for us, the United States, and that means the entire West is ready to kill this entire planet. You have to remember that. That's one side that is. It's an asymmetrical reality. Only one side is prepared to kill all life on Earth. So what does that mean? You can't be an environmentalist or a vegan and be on America's side. So Frank Herbert was also wrong on that, because that was their policy in that time as well. Just because that's the official stance of the United States, that is standing in violation and trying to wind back all the nuclear disarmament treaties and agreements, by the way. And the point of this is not to scare everybody into being worried about nuclear war. That's not that's not what I'm trying to say. But that is the reality of where the West is. That is falling apart. It is dying. It is not going to. It is. The West is like anti-mask, anti-vax, or vaccine relax COVID adult patients who are in denial that their brains are falling apart, and they have Alzheimer's and dementia, and they have Lewy bodies and cytokines just running rampant inside of their brains because they got 6 reinfections, and they're in denial that they're in denial, going to parties thinking that they'll survive that, which is where huge swaths of the population are right now, right? And they're also not thinking. They're thinking less and less clearly because of the decline, right? Not just individuals who believe that there's no pandemic, but also a mass disabling, mass killing, brain, organ, and immune system destroying viruses out there. But the West as a collective whole are in denial that there is anything wrong. Not all of them, but the people that are in leadership, and the closer you are to a privileged position, the more in denial you are, and the deeper the denial is, right? As Richard Wolff, who is a Western leftist Marxist economist, would point out, it is a mental illness, which, and also the Yemen leadership, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, would say that it is a mental illness to, number one, believe in your supremacy and your right to dominate and control others for slaves, for wealth, for territory. And also that in Western culture is mental illness in that sense. In the colonial imperial culture, which is the last 2,000 years plus, that is a mental illness. But then it's a further mental illness it is a mental illness squared when you not only do you believe falsely that you should be able to, you are better than others because of arbitrary characteristics like your accent, your origin, your bank account, your skin color, your Europeanness, your Christianness, or your Jewishness in or it's more your Israelness in Palestine, to believe that you're superior for any of those reasons and deserve other people to control, hurt, kill, use other people as you see fit. That's actually what's in Certainly in the King James and the Western Bible, the Roman and the British, Constantine's Bible and the King James Bible, which were both, by the way, a lot of that was mistranslated to benefit imperial, feudal, colonial, and capitalist rulers. But to dominate and subdue others, that is already a twisted origin story, right? The cowboy story, the way that it's told by the 1950s hegemonic American Hollywood, right? Starring Clint Eastwood and Bruce Wayne, right? That white Europeans fleeing sometimes Europe, the United States has a schizophrenic relationship, a schizoid relationship to Europe, in the sense that, like, it doesn't know if it hates its parent or if it loves and it looks up to. It depends on whatever the most powerful billionaire wants at that moment. But basically, the Europeans, right, left Europe because of sickness and tyranny and King, George, and all of these horrible things that have happened in their western, the Occident, right, the Western. That's why we call it West, because it's the western part of the Eurasian continent. And so in this European territory, there was the plague, there was nasty, brutish, short life, as Thomas Hobbes described in the Leviathan, and there was religious oppression, Louis the 14th and all these horrible absolute monarchs and these aristocracies, they were oppressing under their tyrannical kings, under their Dickensian imperial Britain's 16-year life expectancy, cholera-filled capitalist wool factories and glass factories. There was this horrible oppression and all these famines, right? It's not famine, it's forced starvation of the commoners by the Europeans. It's all barbaric, it's all horrible. But because things were so bad in Europe, right? Protestant versus Catholic, millions of people just dying in these ridiculous wars between Protestant and Catholic. Shout out to Shogun for dunking all over European colonizers. The unwashed the unwashed colonial plunderers who can't stop bickering over tiny discrepancies between Protestant and Catholic, Christian, Western religions, and killing each other for it, and also stealing and enslaving the rest of the planet. But and so because of this horror that happened in Europe in that time, they had to leave and come to the United States. Like, we just had to survive, and it's very much like it's the same story as the modern genocidal Israel settler state, colonial state. We had to leave our place because of persecution and of suffering and oppression, and God has sanctioned it under doctrine of discovery, right? And now we come to this new promised land, right? It's the same thing as going to Israel. It's a new promised land, right? Because in Europe, we can't stop Jewish people. We can't stop being oppressed there. And Lord Balfour and the British said it's impossible to stop Europeans from oppressing, ghettoizing, and hurting Jewish people. And so the only solution is not that we should stop being racist and stop being anti-Semitic as Europeans, because it's so messed up, right? It's like there's nothing that could have been done in Europe. All we can do is leave Europe, because Europeans, we can't get better. But what we can do, right, is we can leave Europe and then steal territory, right? Again, coming back to Fallout, we can lust for territory and gold, and we can gather slaves like African people and bring them to Thomas Jefferson's 260 slave owning property that he stole from native people, and we can make wealth elsewhere. So you see, the American origin story, like the Israeli origin story, and the Canadian and Australian origin story, is one of, we were so horrible. We as Europeans, we were so horrible in Europe that those who did not have titles, we had to leave and repeat the same horrors that were done to us in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, and then now in Palestine. And that is the best that we can hope for. is that because war never changes. But what we mean when we say war, what we mean is racism, colonialism, imperialism, supremacy, and all of these sick things that come out of a twisted Western, Greco-Roman, Spanish, British, French, American, etc. And now Israelite culture. Those are like human inevitable traits. Those are inevitable things that come about human civilization, which obviously that ignores 90% of the non-Western world that didn't exist for the vast majority of the time, did not exist in war, colonialism, imperialism, and death and enslavement. Right, that was not the case, and including in the Arab world, and also including obviously in the indigenous North, Central, and South America, and of course as a Native Hawaiian in Hawaii, that was not our case either. So but you see where so the cowboy, and obviously I'm speaking in vast circles, but the cowboy character, the Lone Ranger, the Indian clearer, right, for in the John Wayne 1950s sense, the cowboy is very important to the Western origin story, the twisted American origin story, because it rewrites the European history into a new history that perpetuates that sickness forward, right, into the 20th century. And it says that it was right and normal and good, and maybe it wasn't all good, but white people had to kill all the native people, the 50 million dead indigenous people, Cherokee, the Trail of Tears, all the smallpox blankets, all the when Andrew Jackson killed women and children, native women and children in their sleep, that was necessary. And then he became president, right? That was necessary because we could not change in Europe, and there's never an identification that we couldn't change. It is only human nature, and it's only right that those who are stronger and more powerful crush and destroy and dominate others for systems of capitalism and colonialism and enslavement, just as the Europeans did to us. You see, there's an admission, right? That's why the Irish, right, the revolutionary Irish, like Claire Daly, disowned Joe Biden this week or recently, right? They said Joe Biden. What did she say exactly? Claire Daly on Biden. She said, because Irish, obviously the Irish were also settlers. In the beginning, they were one of many European settlers who came from their home, their deeply damaged place of a deeply sick, deeply suffering-filled place of Europe, starving, and they came to the United States to make a better life, right? This is Claire talking about Israel and and the horror, and this is the Irish representative saying that as Yemen chose butcher Biden with Europe foul genocide by his side, they are the ones who have enabled the continuation of Israeli terror, and without them it would already be over. The ancestors of Ireland that you claim to be from disown you. Keep our country Ireland out of your American mouth. And as for von der Leyen, for your words and deeds supporting Israel and the ICJ, people of Europe stand with Palestine and South Africa. So, not all of Europe agrees with that, but the American mythology, the American origin story requires the American origin story and the American narrative, because coming back to this idea of colonial education, the American sick origin story requires this colonial education that justifies all of this horror, all of this injustice, all of this violence, all of this continued beating and abusing of children on a civilizational scale, right? Europeans beat their children, crushed and oppressed their own descendants, right, in Europe. And so then they fled to the United States, beat and crushed and killed Native Americans, enslaved, and then told their own children the story that we had to do that, and this is actually good because of divine providence. The God said it was so and gave us this land that we would be fruitful and multiply, because the United States and the white race is the greatest race. Might makes right. Some combination of those. The scientific community used social Darwinism. The Western scientific community, had its own input into that. And there's, Western university and academic and science colonialism is a real active thing. There's a whole video about that. Shout out to this YouTuber and ex-astronomer, Dr. Fatima, who is I think is a Arab origin diaspora ex-astronomer, because being a part of a colonial university scientific action, as an astronomer working with the Western university system on Mauna Kea, witnessing racism and colonialism at the highest scale, actually radicalized her, and she made this whole video. It intersects between imperialism, the struggles in Hawaii, including on Mauna Kea, where the scientific community were trying to violate our sovereignty and continue colonialism, and also with Palestine. So anyways, so watch this video if you have some time. But coming back to this though. So this retelling the story of the cowboy, right? The cowboy riding on his horse, clearing out the Indians, right? And then it's reified and reinstituted. Number one, a lot of actual cowboys were black and brown and majority not white. And it was not a very highly paid thing, but it's trying to again tell a lie, that's all the West does, just as the Romans did, that they were the best and the greatest, and everyone else should kill everyone else for them and their capitalists. And the American story is, we are right and just and good because we're free. We're better than Europeans because we're free, but also Europeans are better than everyone else because we're also a white. Which is a new category that we've constructed here in the United States to consolidate power amongst, our racist, capitalist, colonialist system, which is different from the European, because Europeans have their own construction. Like you stop being German or Irish, which also means you have to give up your Germanness, your Irishness, your Swedishness, to a large extent, and just become the new Rome, right, as the American. And the Capitol and Jefferson's buildings and such were all based directly on Greek and Roman architecture. Their concept of senators. This is straight back to the Caesar era, oligarchy. None of these were actually democratic, by the way, in the sense of equal and just and government by the people. These are always government by tiny minorities of very wealthy, very privileged men, always men. White men in particular, non-Afro-Asiatic men, with a few exceptions and tokenization when it benefited empire. It's kind of like putting Kamala Harris or Obama in place. That doesn't actually benefit black people. The Romans did that as well. They had a few token people in place, but the preeminent powers are always, old blood, and the same in Greece. The Hellenic blood was supreme. So like this, but the narrative, and that's why they, the narrative that like we had to leave and we had to come and we had to take this promised land to secure a future for white children. That's also what Hitler said, right? But that was the American narrative. We had to secure a future for European children because our parents were our governments, our systems, our situation in Europe was so horrible that we had to leave. But you see, there's always been another option. There's always been another option, right? Which is, why don't you have a revolution, like a real one, right? Why don't you collectively fight against your racist, capitalist, feudalist, colonialist, unjust rulers? Like, if you really don't like Scrooge, and you really are upset with the king and the queen and the lords and the ladies, right? Now, like, and there were not zero people, like the French did attempt and they did succeed at beheading many people, obviously, during the Reign of Terror, and, of course, the Marie Antoinette and Louis XIV, people lost heads. Now, like, they failed to like secure a long term actual equality, justice, and freedom and democracy for people. Right. That's why France is where it's at right now, with billionaires and colonialism running. A lot of French colonialism rampant all over Africa, although less so because Africa is not dealing with the Algerian genocide. But some Europeans have tried to cleanse their sick system, right? Sadly, without much success. And obviously, France also supported America in the beginning. But unfortunately, right, the majority of the Europeans have always they simply have not been successful, right? It's kind of like Europe is kind of like you got COVID and then you got COVID too, and then you took a shot. You got a shot, like you got a vaccine, you got Pfizer and a Pfizer 2, and maybe a Novavax, right? But then and that was like the French Revolution, and then it's like, well, I haven't gotten better from my brain fog, and my fibromyalgia isn't going away, and everyone isn't masking around me, so I'm gonna not get any more shots. I'm not gonna mask, and I'm not gonna distance. I give up. Right? This is the European way: is try a little bit and then just give up, because it's hard, and it's more convenient and easy to not mask around you and make everyone else sick, and just participate in this horrible collective self-oppression and destruction, and just try to come out on top by making money, selling hydroxychloroquine, or playing a really big concert like Taylor Swift and raking in 100,000 a night, right? Like, we're all fucked. Humanity bad. We're all bad. It's European, Western bad. We're all bad. So let's just try to make a lot of money hurting each other. And whoever makes the most money while we self-destruct and hurt each other wins. That's basically it, right? Because I mean, why do you have to like leave Europe because of oppression? Well, obviously there were many people that were oppressed in Europe. Their lives were nasty, brutish, and short. People were living to 20 years old, dying from cholera and typhus. People were working in horrible factories. People were suffering in feudal, 1/3 of your salary going to a horrible syphilitic lord who had the right to prima noctem with your wife. This is a sick system, right? This is very sick and very sad, But it's like, but then the solution to plague, sickness, poverty, inequality, death, war, needless war for the vanities of their kings and queens and colonial oppressors. The solution is we should go and do that to other people elsewhere. Let's go to North America and do that to them instead. Let's go to Canada and do that to them instead. Let's go to Australia and do that to them instead. Let's go to Hawaii and let's redo that some more. Let's do that on Mauna Kea. Let's poison Red Hill because maybe we can make some money. We're all bad and everything sucks. Let's not even try. And at the best we can do is vote for one of two parties that are the same racist, capitalist, colonialist party. So at least we can pretend like we're doing something, right? That's why Western democracy, Western representative democracy is the worst thing that's ever existed, because it gives an extra out for sick people to pretend like they're well, and worse, to believe that they can speak down to black and brown and indigenous people as if they're better than them, right? So it's really the worst possible thing. It should be abolished. It should until you get a Chinese style actual democracy, they should be abolished from voting. There should never be another election. That's why it would be really great. It doesn't matter who wins. If there is no U.S. election this year, that could be the best thing possible, because they would have to actually participate in supporting the anti-capitalist, anti-colonial, anti-racist coalitions that are being built, that Aaron Bushnell was actually in support of, right? But as long as you keep, believing, the world is just war and sickness and then nuclear war and forever. And the best we can do is try to come out on top hurting each other. So hurt each other, hurt the other person first, right? So preemptive nuclear strike makes sense from the sick, unhealed Western perspective, right? The United States policy of nuke everyone else first for the richest people on the earth, it makes total sense, right? Because there's, war doesn't change, right? Sick, supremacist, selfish, cowardly human nature, which Western nature, doesn't change, right? So what we have to do is just kill everybody else and take all this stuff first, right? Somebody was gonna colonize, you know, Africa. We got there first, right? Somebody was gonna come to Taiwan and call it the land of milk and honey, and guess what? The Dutch got there first, and that's actually who colonizes Taiwan, not China. Oh, somebody had to come to, you know, the Anishinaabe people and ban their language and culture and rip all their children from their parents' hands, right? It's just the British. We got there first, right? It's inevitable, right? So nuclear weapons exist, like Oppenheimer, right? And this is white man thinking. That's why Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer is not that good. Now that nuclear weapons exist, now it's you know, also let's ignore the fact that it was tested on native peoples in Colorado, native peoples in the Marshall Islands, and indigenous people around the world, and 2 nuclear weapons were set off by the United States in Hiroshima and Nagasaki simply to stop the Soviet Union and communism from spreading there. Actually, that's actually the major reason, because the West is afraid of communism and decolonization, and that's why they're really afraid of Russia and China, because the truth is that they're wrong, and war is not like needless imperialist war is not inevitable, but to accept that requires excoriating and burning and the lies of 2,000 years of your ancestors, right? It requires you to accept that your American great-great-granddaddy was a bad person and a coward, and his great-great-granddaddy, who was a British lord or peasant, were both cowards. And before that, your Roman ancestors were imperial murderers and bad people and cowards, just like your cowboy and just like your feudal era great-great-great-granddaddy. And your Greek ancestors before them were also horrible, sick, slave-owning, women-beating, because women were second-class citizens in Greece, horrible, murderous cowards, every single one of them, right? And that is really hard to do, because that's your entire world, right? That is all of Western history. That is all your ancestors. That is the stories that propel civilizations forward. They've all been sick, every single one of them, you know. And that's really hard. If the whiter you are, the harder that is. If you're black, if you're Palestinian, if you're Arab, if you're Chinese, if you're other Asian, with some small exceptions, it's not necessarily it's not easier to unlearn that if you're a diaspora that has been broken, being as a Chinese diaspora being educated in DC or London or Berlin. But it's easier. It's you're not as tied to this sick, deep narrative that there's inevitability of enslavement, war. You know, the people who lust and accumulate wealth are guaranteed to win every time. You're not tied to that, because you're not your ancestors, and that which you are, your entire life, your LinkedIn network, your Discord network, right? All your references, right? They're not even your science fiction or pop culture. Right? You can't read a science fiction novel or watch a science fiction movie in the West and not encounter the name Tiberius or Alexander somewhere. You know what I'm saying? I mean, whether that's Captain Kirk, or a space station in a 1990s video game in space. You can't go anywhere in the West without running into all these Greeks, Romans, British, French, Europeans, 1800s cowboys, 20th century cowboys, and that includes Fallout, because it's made by Western people in California in the 1990s, right? You are stuck in this. You're not stuck, but you have roots growing into all of these history. You're rooted in this sick radioactive history that is about perpetually refusing to address the sins of your fathers, and these are your white fathers, you know, and sometimes to the cries and the screams of your mothers, right, in the patriarchy, but and sometimes to the collaboration of white women who owned slaves in the 1800s. But either way, none of this, it has never been righted. And then this insistence that, well, I mean, that's just how it has to be. My daddy beat my wife. My daddy beat his wife, and he owned slaves, or he owned a capitalist business, and and his daddy before him, you know, he went on a ship across the sea, and he landed in Africa somewhere, and he took gold out of that, and that's just what had to happen, because in Europe, his daddy, right, his daddy was a peasant who was being beat up by someone else's daddy who was the Lord, and he suffered, and that's just what has to happen. This is just what has to happen, is we have to just keep on harming children, right, and telling our children lies that they can't change this, or tell them when the children are in kindergarten, Western people say, you know, sharing is caring and the golden rule, and let's treat everyone equally. And then when you get about 15, 16, 17, 18, and definitely when you're an adult in the workplace, life isn't fair. Everything is murder. The world is a bad place. You just have to deal with it. This is like, but it's so to be a Westerner, part of it is to be in perpetual, infinite cognitive dissonance, where you live in this world that tells you there are good and there is bad, and we should share and be kind, and basically we should be communists when you're kindergarten, and then suddenly it's like we have to be capitalist, ruthless murderers and enslavers, and hierarchical, and we all have to be mean girls and mean boys, and we have to be toxic pieces of shit, and we have to be liars all day long, right? After a certain age, right? Well, that is the repeat COVID infection of Western civilization setting into your psyche, right? And so, you know, and so like that's like, it's really unfortunate. That's why like the cowboy story. I mean the actual story of cowboys, you can read about that, like, you know, if you want, but you gotta read it, get it from like a black or non-white historian that isn't complicit in genocide at a university in the West. But like the narrative that like we had to keep harming, we had to come and we had to kill the Indians, and we had to enslave these people, and if we did, it wasn't that bad. This is a narrative that has to be perpetually retold. And then now there's a new narrative, which is like, well, we had to go and kill Iraqis, and we had to go and kill people in Afghanistan because, like the Indians before them, they're savage. We have to kill Palestinians because they're savage. Just like we had to come from Europe and kill the Native Americans because they were savage. And we deserve Gaza. We deserve to build lazy rivers and water parks and artificial wave pools and Israeli, hummus, which is not Israeli, it's a stolen food. Just like stealing the word aloha and sticking it on a white man's grill, poke bar somewhere in Chicago. We have to come to Gaza and steal that because, like, it's just manifest destiny, you know? So to this very second, the Western narrative is doubling and tripling and folding in on itself, you know? And it's very sad. It's very sad. But also, this is also why you have to set your world on fire. I don't mean that you have to start nuclear war, right? But in the sense that, like, if you're in the Western world, if you're speaking English and or French or Spanish, you're already in it, whether you like it or not. You can't speak English and not like be reading at some point about the Greeks and the Romans, and generally in a positive light, and the same for the Europeans and the same for the Americans, and etc. But so that world is, you know, it's a sick place, you know, and now, for better or worse, you're in it, right? I think Carl Zhao, which is one of our Chinese, he spent a lot of time in the diaspora. He said he watched this video of these two Asians having this discussion where I think it was like a Chinese diaspora boy was talking to a girl in a video call, and the Chinese diaspora girl was like, "You tried to date my mom? Why would you try to date my mom?" And then the Asian boy is like, "Well, you don't want you want the Charizard, you don't want the Charmander," or something really ridiculous. and Carl said the diaspora was a mistake, you know, but in one sense, like, maybe it was, you know, the diaspora of Europeans into the rest of the world committing genocide, like in the US, Australia, New Zealand, etc. That was a mistake, that's for sure. Should have like fixed your own Europe, right? Imagine if Europeans had succeeded at undoing the inequality, economic and racist and feudalist inequality in Europe, right? like what China did, where they had a revolution and then brought about communism and a socialist path, and now they're beating America, right? Imagine if Europeans had like actually cleansed and revolted and got rid of their selfish, individualistic ruling classes and all the King Georges. I mean, we wouldn't have to deal with this ridiculous Kate Middleton nonsense of was she just bad at Photoshop? Did Charles get abducted by aliens and all this ridiculous speculation, right? And also sending millions of dollars a year in British taxpayer money to fund a amazingly antiquated, ridiculous, currently existing monarchy in Britain, right? If the Europeans had actually like had full revolution and brought about actual equality in Europe in the 16, 17, 1800s somewhere, right? Then they wouldn't have had to all mass leave Europe and then commit genocide all across all these other continents, right? Or I mean, I'm not saying that's what would have happened, but like we had to the narrative from the American, which is the world's largest Euro settler colony, right? The perspective from America is we had to, because that was the only thing. That's not true, right? There could be a 21st century where the European socialism with European characteristics, where Europeans did not leave, where they cleaned their own house, right? Where they righted the sins of their fathers and they healed from the sickness of the Roman trauma, where each of their peoples were annihilated and crushed. The British and the French have no creation story, right? That's actually what is a unique thing about them. And the Arthurian tale is this warped, put together, like cobbled together thing, because they were one of the first early people crushed by the Romans and the French. They have no creation story. There was a creation story. There were creation stories. German, a lot of the other peoples have, but they don't. The Western Europeans, right? Because they were deeply damaged. That's one of the evidences, and also the Piccadilly Circus, which is literally a Roman construction over indigenous territory in Britain. The roads that they built they were not roads to help. They were not like the Belt and Road Initiative. They were roads for conquest and crushing and enslavement and pillaging and unequal relationships between the people who used to be indigenous in Britain and once in France and once in Spain. And then they were all annihilated, and they were replaced with traumatized people, right? With no origin story, constantly at war with each other when Rome collapsed. Right, that's why I call Westerners the unhealed descendants of Greco-Roman trauma. And so, like, but they could have, instead of passing that on to another generation in the 1800s, they could have said, we will not perpetuate what the Caesars, we will not perpetuate what the Caligulas, we will not perpetuate what the Aquila shielded, phalanx armed, denarius dollar hegemony weaponizing, because that's what the Romans also did. We will not repeat the Roman Empire's trauma that is installed this sick, unjust, feudalistic, colonial and then colonialist system. We will not repeat that. We will not just suffer the Irish famine and the European famine. We will not be starved to death by our leadership class, our horrible leadership class, who are still sucking our food out. The British practiced that on the Irish, but all the European populations have always, when there was time of scarcity, everything went to the unjust ruling classes, right? The aristocracies. Same for the French, right? John Valjean singing about going to prison for decades for stealing a loaf of bread. That is the in the Les Miserables. That's the continuation of a Roman trauma onto the children, and the children struggling to throw off their sick parents, right? Struggling to throw off their unjust systems, but failing, sadly, right? They have failed. If they had succeeded, there could be a Europe with socialism with European characteristics in Europe, and then they would not. They could have figured out a way to use the resources more equitably and more efficiently by learning from indigenous peoples. Like the potato that is staple in Ireland and all across Europe, the indigenous people actually showed Europeans how to use that, and it saved them from many famines. But instead of killing native people in Turtle Island as thanks, the Europeans could have simply learned how to grow food in a more efficient way, in a less destructive monocropping way, left native peoples in Cahokia and in the Blackfoot and Algonquin territory intact. The Europeans could have visited equitably, like, I don't know, Chinese and Cubans visiting each other, like Cubans going to see the beautiful mosques, multi-thousand-year-old mosques in Urumqi in Xinjiang, which still exists because China didn't genocide Muslims, unlike what you're being told by your sick parents, also known as your Western ruling classes and media moguls. Cubans and the relationship between the Cubans and the Chinese, which is very friendly, amicable, and win-win cooperative, could have been the 1700s relationship between the Europeans and the Native Americans. And the Africans, by the way. Europe could have visited Africa and mutually developed the African, like the Zulu and the Egyptians and the African people in, what was later many of the peoples that are described in Wakanda. Like, the Europeans could have cooperated with Africa in a win-win relationship, and they both could have prospered, and way less people would have suffered and died, especially Africans, but even Europeans, way less would have suffered and died, right? There would not need to be a Rhodesia. There would be no Elon Musk. There would be, the nightmare Elon Musk was created because Europeans failed to heal themselves. If Elon, as a descendant of colonialist, apartheid, South African millionaires who believed in this inherent supremacy of the white races against the black populations, who they pushed at gunpoint into mines and put down with massacres until very recently, by the way. Trevor Noah joked about that even. It's disgusting. It's America collaborating with the South African colonialists. But Elon is he's an emerald diapered baby descended from the blood diamond, the murder minerals colonialists in South Africa. But that wouldn't have existed. There would be no apartheid South Africa to undo if the Europeans had not if they had succeeded at healing themselves and had been doing equitable trade with Africa the way that China and Cuba do trade. And the Chinese visit Cuba and then they say these are beautiful beaches and this is a really nice place. And when the Chinese visit Cuba, the Cubans, 99% of all that money that Chinese spend in a hotel there, that goes straight back to the healthcare and the housing and the material needs of the Cuban population with the socialism with the Cuban characteristics. And when the Cubans visit Xinjiang or Beijing to see the most advanced country on this earth that has healed its relationships, unlike Europe, unlike the United States, the Cuban money that is spent in Beijing to see a 6G empowered world's greatest artificial intelligence high-speed rail or 100 trillion times faster quantum supercomputer, with the Cubans can see all kind of amazing things in China, not so much in the US or Europe. Yanis Varoufakis is called Europe the stupid continent. Very correct. It's also the sick continent. If Europe had healed that, then the African and European relationship would be very different today. If Europe had set its false narratives on fire, it had successful complete revolution and took in the penicillin of collective mass struggle against its sick, abusive daddies and sometimes mommies like Queen Victoria, etc. Then Europe could have mutual beneficial relationships between all the rest of the world. But that's not the history, right? It's 500 years of death, destruction, war, not changing, and genocide, right? But this the inevitability, the narrative of, so this is like, I mean, I'm not saying this is what Fallout is saying, but that's part of it, is that, like, if you interpret it as like if you interpret Fallout as what the Romans did, what the Spanish did, what the British Empire did, what Americans doing is inevitable, right? That narrative, that is not just a video game That is not just a post-apocalyptic video game story. That is the Western narrative, right? This is inevitable. This is inevitable. This is who we are. This is who humans are. Humans are bad, right? Now the end stage, the Western terminal phase, right? The metastasized cancer stage 4 hospice stage of Western civilization is antinatalism, right? It's the humanity must go. It's like environmentalists. It's like humans must be eliminated, right? This is also deep in modern storytelling, right? This is like 12 Monkeys. If we just get rid of all the humans because we're so evil and bad, then that's the best thing that we can do, right? But that's also that is again, that's also like failing to accept and failing to, because actually that's easier. That is the cop-out version. That's the saying, well, we're all just bad, which number one, disservice to indigenous peoples, to the people who have had successful revolutions, to the Pacific peoples, to the peoples of Africa, to the Palestinians, right? You are doing, this is why indigenous peoples, the Palestinians and the revolutionary peoples and a lot Arab African people, they don't say things like that, right? Because that is the easy way out, right? This is like somebody who has been a criminal, who's been lying to his wife, who has been stealing people's stuff. He's been like not talking about Palestine because his university said don't. He's been a horrible coward, right? And then he just says, you know what? I'm just going to kill myself. That's the easy way out. Like, what's harder? What's harder than that is dedicating the rest of your life to struggling, like having honest conversations with the wife that you cheated on, coming to the Palestinians and going, I'm sorry that I fucked up and I kept my job rather than support you because Elbit Systems and Raytheon and Lockheed Martin are paying my university administrators to fire me, and I quit the university and I'm going to spend the rest of my life like struggling with the black and indigenous people of color to bring about end of colonialism and racism and capitalism, right? But that's harder. But what's easier? It's just but that's the Western way, is to just cower out, just like, well, either I win or I'm just gonna jump out the window, So the eco-fash is a kind of like, it's like that. Well, the world's dying, so I guess I'll just kill everyone else to thin the herd of the earth. It's also the billionaire narrative, or it's like, well, we're just bad. We're killing the earth, so humans just have to go. But these are all Western cowardice and sickness. It's deep, deep sickness. Your responsibility as an American, as a European, is to clean your country. That's why it's what you ask the Vietnamese and the Chinese. Really, what do you think the Europeans and Americans should do? I can't really say exactly what they need to do on any particular streaming service, but they need to bring about a country that is actually completely democratic, equal, and actually just, not just throw that like some kind of bad Photoshop. The US Western democracy is like a bad Kate Middleton Photoshop from a Vogue magazine cover 2 years ago. That's Western democracy. It's not real. You need to bring about a real one. And that requires working with all of the oppressed peoples that you still oppress for your own benefit. Even in academia, I mean, whether it's corporate, military, wherever you work, you're wrapped up in that somewhere, right? And that is education as well, right? Teaching your children these lies is also a failure to address those problems. And and anyway, because let me move on from that. I think I've said what I wanted to say regarding that. So obviously this is not just about the Fallout, the TV show. I will say, like, I was really impressed by this trailer. I liked it a lot. This guy who plays the little aside, I'm gonna come back to the core topics, but I'm gonna move a little bit on. So Walton Goggins was also in I'm a Virgo. And I liked him a lot. Holly's seen him a lot in The Righteous Gemstones, I believe. If you haven't seen I'm a Virgo, I recommend that as well. That's with Boots Riley, a black communist. Speaking of people that you should be listening to, that's one of them. And I'm a Virgo stars Walton Goggins as the hero, as Mr. Good Cop, Mr. Good Cop, who is not the good guy, obviously, in the show. And he did a good job in that. And also it has actually, I don't know who all the other people are. Oh, it has the guy from the 1984 Dune, and the Twin Peaks show. Kyle MacLachlan, that's his name. And anyways, but you're probably not here for random IMDb trivia. But I think that like the trailer is definitely like looks like something that's gonna be very very fun, very nostalgic. You've got the vault, people coming out the vault. You got little bushy-tailed, bright-eyed, young protagonist. Like, I'm here to bring justice, and you look like somebody who is the aggressor because I believe that you have attacked someone. Since you have attacked, this person has the right to self-defense. It's like the vault dwellers who have lived in their perfect little sheltered underground nuclear shelter for a century or whatever it was. Don't have no idea how the bigger, wider world in the post-apocalyptic universe works, full of violence and death and murder. It is full of really nasty characters, raiders and slavers and random cowboy ghouls that are their skin falling off and the noses are in pieces because they were hit by nuclear blast waves and fallout radiation. And then you have the Brotherhood of Steel, the knight, these kind of like Templar knight / like Warhammer 40K power armored a group that are kind of they're like one of the forces in the world. And then there's the Imperial enclave that I'm not sure if you actually see them, but they're certainly in the background. They're the remains of the United States Imperial government. And in Fallout 2, you can do a JFK to the technical U.S. president in Fallout 2. I will say that. So yeah. But anyways, so there's something else I want to say. So yeah, so when it comes to like so Fallout and like I'm not everything I had said. I'm not saying that's what Fallout means. Like I think, and I don't know everything about the creators of Fallout. I mean, I know who Tim Kaine is. I'm a game designer and stuff, but if you don't read Fallout as a caution, as a this is good and normal, actually. If you read Fallout as this is like it is a cautionary tale or a satire. It is. It's very comedic, like darkly comedic, right? If you read it as like this is like a cautionary tale about nuclear war and why it's bad, and also there's a lot of jokes at the expense of American culture, like, hey everybody, we're all just gonna sit down and duck and cover, get ready, you're use your Pip Boy. Your Pick Boy. I think there's one of those. It's like they're like jokes about 1950s nuclear the atomic age, right? Like all the drawings in Fallout is like, hey everybody, when the nuke goes off, just go under your desk and you'll be fine. Like, are you growing a sixth thumb? Oh, that's weird. That's too bad. It's like, so a lot of it is kind of like mocking the way it's part love letter, but it's also part mocking American culture, and certainly 1950s, but it's really not any different now. And like the way that like the government lies and the marketing is nonsense and really thinly veiled, really not very. It's not very good ways to tell people that smoking is good, nuclear war is fine, things will be great. All we got to do is we'll defeat the Soviet Union and we'll bring about a great American society again. All we have to do is just, if something happens, if the Bay of Pigs invasion goes bad, we'll go into this little magical safe, and then we'll just come out, and it'll be fine. And like obviously, like in the world of Fallout, it's like wait, right? It's like that's not what happened. Like this, things are not fine. Everything's really bad. Like, this really sucks. The richest people are kind of okay because they can't afford it and they have access to one of these vaults. And the really, really, really richest and worst people have it. They're still hurting and killing people. They're like experimenting. The Enclave, right? These are the U.S. Government and billionaire classes in DC. They're like literally experimenting on everyone in the other vaults, and all kind of, you later on learn in the series like all these horrible things are happening. So Fallout is kind of like contrasting, right? Like the Fallout intro is like contrasting the way that what is sold as the Vault of the Future, we're gonna be fine in this nuclear war. The way that the what the government is doing, what the businesses are doing, this is normal and good and acceptable, and it's like smoking is fine. The Vietnam War is going really well. We definitely didn't go into it for any wrong reasons. I mean, a lot of that, like the way that the West talks to itself, which is like a lot through TV, like Mr. Handy, like you're watching this in the beginning of Fallout, it's like, it's not the song I don't want to set the world on fire by the Ink Spots, but it's a song like that. I think the creators couldn't afford that specific 1940s like crooner hit song, and so they got another one. It was like I think the first Fallout had a song called Maybe, and the second one had A Kiss to Build a Dream On. And I think Fallout 3, they finally got that. I don't want to set the world on fire. I just want to start a flame in your heart. I don't think I can sing it. I might get in copyright trouble, so I won't. But you can go watch the Fallout trailer. You can hear it. But like while that song is playing, you're looking at it. You're zoomed into a TV screen that's showing like the Vault of the Future and a non-computerized Thunderbird card. It's only $199,999, right? And then it's Mr. Handy, cooks and cleans, and he's like a robot helper. It's like retro 50. It's like if the 50s never ended and now there's robots that work and you can buy them. It's like it's retro future, and then even further future. Then like it's like the Jetsons future came about. Shortly after that, the world went into nuclear war, and then 100, 200 years later, you're coming out of the vault. So there's a lot of things that are happening there. Right, so it's like it's the 1950s future, the 1950s Disney astounding world of the future. The 1950s, a flying car in every house. It's like the Back to the Future 2 future, right? Which is kind of 1950s future. Hoverboards and hoverboards and people with weird they don't have the weird, they still have 1950s haircuts. They don't have like that weird swirly bullshit. It's like the 1950s future projects into the 2060s. I think it was 2050. It's like the late 21st century, and then nuclear war happens, and then it's really and then the world is screwed for a long time, and then people in the vault come out. Anyway, long story short, so all of that is like it's like there's a lot happening there, but a lot of Fallout is like definitely it's very satirical, it's very comical, and a lot of it is like at the expense of the ridiculousness of mainstream American culture, the marketing, the government ads, the ridiculous government policy, the stupidity of this imperialistic, militaristic, and also capitalistic Western hubris to believe you can play around with nuclear war and it's just going to be fine. Really nasty, like neocon, machinations that involve killing all of humanity to try to rule over the nuclear radiated ashes. That's literally part of it, right? That's like one of the most dark parts. But those are all like, these are not. That's just Doctor Strangelove. right? Like these are, and that's not just the movie Doctor Strangelove or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, which itself was in the 1960s, right? Starring and I've done a video on Doctor Strangelove. That itself was in the 1965 starring Peter Sellers. This was a story of nuclear brinksmanship, annihilation, and it was also a comedy. It was a very dark comedy, but it was very, it's like Fallout. It in the 1960s was already a comedy about the push towards nuclear war, and a lot of that, what was pushing that was this sick capitalistic preemptive first strike desire to maintain control of hegemony over all, right? It's really to a large extent. I mean, obviously, Russia doesn't have like zero fault in that, but they would have been happier. The Soviet Union would have been happier to not have to be constantly escalating. But the United States had used nukes first, number one, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the United States had explicit they had 60 plus plans as leaked by the whistleblower Daniel Ellison, who was privy to like the Rand Corporation and the highest echelons of the U.S. military-industrial complex. And Daniel Ellsberg revealed that the United States had was very close to having nuked China like 60 times. They had very explicit plans, right? And they had very, very unhinged people, very, very horrible people in the U.S. military, in the United States government, all over the place, right? Who like the literal Doctor Strangelove is based upon a real person, a real doctor who led a lot of the decisions. He was the trainer for the Project for a New American Century. He was the predecessor for was a Herman Kahn. He was the predecessor for the Zbigniew Brzezinski Grand Chessboard United States Planetary Primacy Scheme. Obviously, all of this rooted in anti-communism, all of this rooted in continued colonialism and imperialism, all of it rooted in preservation of a sick capitalistic system, right? That involved nuclear first strike, always nuclear first strike, right? Constantly threaten nuclear war everywhere, constantly threaten everyone, right? This is most Americans and Europeans don't realize the United States has always constantly been threatening nuclear war for the last 80 years without a break. But it's doing that to Asia. It's doing that to Asia. It's doing that to obviously Russia, especially, and all these other places that is trying to bring under control. It says like, if you don't do what we say, Israel has the Samsonite direct option. Their Samsonite project directive basically says like, we will nuke all of Europe if we ever get into much trouble, because Israel is just baby America. We have intercontinental ballistic missiles and Air Force, either ICBMs or an Air Force of jet fighters supplied by America that will nuke Berlin, London, Rome, and Barcelona. We will kill every European city if it looks like we're losing. So you must, and America and Europe, you all have to keep helping us, or we will nuke you all, right? So this 1960s movie is not just a pie in the sky, out of nowhere, and also cowboys are directly involved in that, by the way. Speaking of cowboys, right? It's not just a pie. This is a U.S. military, unhinged U.S. military personnel riding cowboy style like John Wayne, right? The epitome of America for the mid 20th century in its narrative of itself for the world, riding a nuclear bomb that sets off the end of the world, right? And this was a dark comedy like Fallout about the unhingedness and the horribleness of a lot of things wrong with the United States and the West, certainly. And so this was a show, not coming out of nowhere. It was a movie coming out of real, written, known policies and real people. Let me just he was one of the original real Doctor Strangeloves, right? Um, and these were people who existed who have, and they're not gone either. Nancy Pelosi, Victoria Nuland, who orchestrated the proxy war in Ukraine that has resulted in so many millions of people displaced and hundreds of thousands killed, and the collapse of well, in a weird way backfired on her, and the gun blew up in her face. Like, it's like having a very low luck roll in Fallout. And Victoria Nuland, the hegemony manager of Project New America, the descendant of the Doctor Strangelove, Masters of the Universe groups, the Trilateral Commission, and Zbigniew Brzezinski's Grand Chessboard Strategy. She was from the same neoconservative, U.S. primacy at all costs, U.S. total domination of the world at all costs, and by extension, capitalist colonialist domination at all costs. She has a direct descendant to Herman Kahn. Tony Blinken, most of Biden's cabinet, Tony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, these are all people that have a direct lineage straight back to Dr. Strangelove. Constantly playing Schrodinger's cat, super dangerous nuclear war, brinksmanship, and constant aggression to maintain superpowerdom status. So this is not like made up stuff. This was just who America is, actually. It's this guy with the German, because Dr. Strangelove himself, one of several different characters that Peter Sellers plays, is a he is a, I mean, no, this is not an anti-disabled. He is in a wheelchair. He's not bad because he's disabled, although the United States is certainly ableist. But he has a glitch in his arm constantly, where his arm accidentally Sig Heils and salutes the Führer, which is pointing to the fact that the United States, through things like Operation Gladio, has had incorporated vast quantities of Nazis into its own science, into NASA, into the highest echelons of government, engineering, and also installed them into Europe as well, and has never not been deeply influenced by, and obviously the Americans and Nazis, it's like who influenced what? It's really like they're just the same. There's like Siamese twins. Hitler read about the genocide of Native Americans and said, I would like to do that but he didn't even succeed at doing it at the scale that the Americans did it, in terms of total deaths. And also Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was a good friend of Hitler as well. And so this book, the fusion of like this eugenicist, it's really just one branch of, extreme eugenicists, but it was very close to the forefront after World War II when this movie was made. People were thinking a lot about, the legacy of the Nazis and what does that mean? And, what if the Nazis got nuclear weapons? The thing is, the Nazis have nuclear weapons because the United States is, again, has huge, vast quantities of literal Nazis that were installed in their government and have been there ever since. And they're obviously, even if you don't have literal direct lineage to the Third Reich Nazis, you have countless white supremacists all over the place in the U.S. And they're all supremacists of some kind, even if they're not specifically, white nationalists, although those are also a threat. And so, anyways, but that's Doctor Strangelove, and that's like where that comes from. And so Fallout is it like, and if you read Fallout the way that movies like Doctor Strangelove or the day the Earth stood still was also a 1950s the 1950s version, and I have a video about the day the Earth stood still, which is a commentary about the problems with war and violence and conquest and the inability to stop the inability of some people. It's more universalized in this because it was made in America, But it's about like if you can't stop fighting these needless wars and conquest and weaponizing this violence and seeing everybody as a threat, then this super advanced peaceful federation of alien races will come and we have a system that deals with that. It's called having robots like Gort. This that are the weapons that will destroy anyone who is violent, and they're neutral arbiters to enforce demilitarization, and but it's also a commentary on the dangers of the nuclear age as well. Anyways, I'm too far off of the central topic, but all of those the original Fallout creators said that they were inspired by things like that, things like Mad Max, these post-nuke dystopias of the 50s, 60s, the post-nuke dystopias of the 70s that were like largely cautionary tales like Mad Max. I Have a Boy and His Dog. I Have No Mouth and I'm a Scream was a sci-fi story dealing with that by Harlan Ellison. And so if you if you read Fallout in that sense, right, then it's kind of like from this is like satire, not a mockumentary, but this is a mocking and a cautionary tale. Then then it's less problematic, but like Starship Troopers or I'm not gonna say Dune, but Starship Troopers or Star Wars, right? Or The Boys, the TV show The Boys, right? These are all shows and movies that whatever, was it Verhoeven or the Lost Boys showrunners, whatever they meant to say, whatever they meant by their creation, their art, like that's not what many, possibly the majority of people took, right? Certainly the show, the original Starship Troopers was definitely like, Heinlein was a pro-capitalist, anti-communist and very racist person who believed in the necessity of crushing the Asian communist threat as he saw it, right? So it was not a attack on the United States empire and militarism in the way that ostensibly the 1990s movie Starship Troopers is, right? But the way that people interpreted that movie is largely not as a cautionary tale, not as a mocking of that culture, right? And that's saying this is a problem and this is bad, right? Especially the people that they're ostensibly were like this is the people that are the problem. Like the Americans use Starship Troopers, like it's on the helmets in U.S. military, in deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. I remember reading like these posts from like U.S. military personnel saying they love Starship Troopers. They signed up for the United States military because of Starship Troopers. Even it's like on helmets and stuff, like like quotes and slogans about how great it is to fight the horrible enemies. I mean, obviously Starship Troopers, it's insects, right? But like obviously who were they fighting in the 90s and the 90s and the teens, right? Palestinians relatives like Iraqis and Syrians, and then also literally Palestinians, especially now the U.S. military is deployed in Palestine, right? So like this and anyway, so I mean that's a commentary on like when stories are told in the West, this like what constitutes, how on the nose or ham-fisted does it, how directly do you have to say something for it to actually get through? I think is actually like largely misunderstood and up for discussion. I mean, to my mind, it's like unless you are actually saying the thing, like as a counter example to Starship Troopers, like Riddick was largely disliked because it was like saying it had, as I bring up on these streams frequently, Riddick, if you don't know what Chronicles of Riddick, it had in its time when came out in the 90s, it had a lot of more negative connotations because because it more clearly was saying what it meant, right? Riddick, unlike Starship Troopers, unlike Star Wars, the main character Riddick is a non-white prisoner. In well, not the prequel, but in the predecessor in the series, Pitch Black, it's a white Clint Eastwood looking, he's very deeply American, blue-eyed Clint Eastwood looking cop, or at least he's ostensibly a cop at the beginning of Pitch Black, is carrying Riddick around on a leash for much of the movie. But by the end, the cop is shown to be a lying, actually more drug abusing than the nasty drug dealer criminal that's not white. He's a lying. The cop is the white man American cowboy cop is in the lying, drug abusing, cowardly guy who hurts innocent people for money. Which is that's who the West is. I mean, like I already pointed out. So it's much more honest. And then Riddick is the black Muslims in basically space Palestine, right? And are in New Mecca are existing. It's basically a space Palestine. They're existing peacefully with Christians and Jews, and then space Europeans / America. They're like European. This is why Riddick was actually better than any of these other movies, including Dune, Starship Troopers, or Star Wars. Because it actually says things in a way that like gets through. The bad guys are space Europeans with like 1600s Euro armor with 20th century American assault rifles. It's very clear, like they're deeply Christian. They're like, the way they talk is like a Christian Western pastor or priest. And it's also historically accurate because these are people who went around, crushed and killed and destroyed, and they're colonized, and they blow up and they kill all the peacefully coexisting black and brown and some white Muslims and Christians and Jews in the space Arab world, which is literally what happened, right? But white people, Americans, really there was a negative reaction to Chronicles of Riddick, and everyone was speculating, oh, Vin Diesel's a criminal. And he was actually in prison, and he's a bad guy, and Vin Diesel's a bad guy because he does all these drugs. He is his character from Fast and the Furious or something, right? And and they didn't like it, but the reason why that they didn't like it is the same. The unspoken reason why why white Western people tend to like Dune and dislike Riddick, right? The unspoken reason is because it's actually this is the same thing we're talking about. It's the supremacy and it's the colonial supremacist white racist mentality, which is we and our it's like we and our people are good. Who's we, right? Me and my American, and then there my British and my French and my European and then my Western Greek and Roman ancestors. We, all of us together as a Western civilization, we are the good guys. They go and some of us are bad apples, and if we're a strong cowboy or a good gladiator or a buff knight or a space knight like Luke Skywalker, or things are bad, but like a good one of us, a good white guy with a gun or a sword will stop the bad white guys, and and we'll have the best future by doing a genocide that kills the least number of people, like in doing 66 billion or whatever. And that's the best we can hope for is 66 billion dead as some white guy turns into a worm and leads up, but you see, like, but that it's still whether it's a really good future like Star Wars, or the Star Wars is like, we defeated the Empire, yay, now we're all free. It's still a white guy with a sword, a light sword, a white guy with a gun, or a white guy with a saber, or a white guy with genetic eugenics experiment, Nazi Benny Gesserit breeding program, psionic powers, and good knife fight skills. It's all we got there was always some kind of sword, little knife, laser sword, big long sword, or maybe a cowboy gun. But a good strong white guy with a gun is individually gonna save all of them. And it's got to be individual, because if it was too collective, then it would be communism, which is anti-Western. Remember? So, but Riddick is like, no, it's actually like, it's not white guys with swords. It's a black guy. It's not white guys with swords, guns, lightsabers, or it's a black guy who is like trying to not go back to prison, and stands up against the empires, and actually more than just the black guy in the diaspora enslaved in a U.S. prison, is actually like the black imams, like the best guy in Riddick is actually a black holy man. He's a black Muslim, which is very much. Yemen has a lot of Muslims, and some of them are black, and they're the most based country. They're actually destroying and defeating the U.S. empire in the West as we speak. They're the only country that's enforcing the anti-genocide laws, and they have hypersonic Mach 8 missiles that are fucking them all up. And the U.S. is going to be done soon, right? So Riddick is actually correct, right? Because, the axis of resistance is Arab led. It's not white led. It's China is economically, and these are not Western white guys with guns and swords and sabers that are saving everyone. But that's not that's not the narrative that is told in the Western science fiction that gets celebrated, right? And in not just in fantasy too, but sci-fi is a genre that I focus on, and so and I mean this. I'm branching off into a discussion about fiction, obviously, but the same problem, right? Which is that like you can't people come back to or people I think there would be less rejection of the truth, and including in fiction and also in history and also in their political activities and in education, if people were like Aaron Bushnell, or the thing is like Aaron Bushnell, like what's his name, Walton Goggins, like had to be in this, he was in Boots Riley's show as the bad white guy. I mean, Boots Riley's I'm a Virgo is very similar to Riddick, because the bad character, the bad dude is a white superhero cop man who's trying to beat up and oppress black people in Oakland that are doing tenant strikes, unionizing, and trying to basically throw off the shackles of racist capitalism, right? And like like they're like, it's not impossible to do that, right? But it's like it's still like there's much work that has to be done to come to it's a grieving part of it. Is a grieving process. You will have to like lose this sense of like looking up to your own ancestors and like accepting not just like your daddy did a few bad things but he was like redeemable. It's actually like, no, he was like irredeemable, and to redeem your sick colonialist capitalist parents and their projects as a whole, as having a few bad apples, right, is the perpetuation of their sickness into your children, and not even if you don't have children, into the next generation. Because what you say and what you do and how you act and the way you live in the world and what you share and what you teach in your classes and what you propagate and the way you talk about things, that is what pushes the culture forward into the next generation. So by not setting your sick parents' world on fire and healing from that damage, right, you are enabling the next generation. So it's like what a lot of Hawaiians will say, which is like, we will stand today because we don't want to leave this work for our children to do. That was a big line. That was a big common sentiment on Mauna Kea. It's also the same thing in Palestine. A lot of the Black Lives Matter. I mean, all of these actions and movements is a similar refrain, which is like, if we don't stop and put our foot down and stand against the United States imperial colonial processes here in Hawaii, just as an example, we're leaving that work. For in the Hawaiian word is like the hana, like we're leaving that work. If we do pauhana now and we quit early before we don't do everything we can, Our children will have to fight even harder as things get worse, as the wildfires in Lahaina increase, as the United States military eats more of our land, as billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg build more underground bunkers and eat more of our territory, and everything falls, and Hawaiian language is further eradicated, as another 10% of Hawaiians leave Hawaii, as like Hawaiians and Palestinians, we're in exactly the same fight in that sense, right? So like from our perspective, it's like it's even more dire, like, you know, where like we like, I mean, obviously there are Hawaiians who are still cowarding out, sadly, and I'm, you know, not to name names, but this is part of the colonial process, is trying to buy off and manipulate and scare off all of the colonized to stop fighting, right? And so I think Dr. Fatima talking about astro-colonialism said, like, the difference between the Palestinians and Hawaiians is there's still a majority of Palestinians who represent a threat to the white colonial imperial forces, and so they're being directly murdered. Whereas in Hawaii, it's far less. I mean, that is part of it. It is partially the number of people. There's other things to it, but I mean that is a part of it. But other than that, Hawaii and Palestine are two indigenous places with indigenous peoples like us Hawaiians here, and in Palestine, obviously the Palestinians, who you know, that's what the Palestinian Authority exists for, is to try to get Palestinians to give up, just give up and lie over and die, right? And if you just peacefully coexist, the thing about the Palestinians is they don't really have the option. Well, they have the option to leave. Like, if all the Palestinians, you know, they don't always have the option to leave. It's really sick. But a lot of them have left, but the reason why like many choose not to, even when they can, is because they can't come back, right? They're like trying to save the land that they originate from, that has been unjustly stolen from them. It's taking a principle. It is taking a very dangerous and principled stand against that injustice, right? And that's why the soul of the earth, a lot of it is coming from Palestine. The fight over who humanity actually is, certainly who the West is, and who and the future in that region. But really, it's like it's a litmus test for who you are right now, which side you stand on, right? And which it should be. You know, but it has to do with, like, if all the Palestinians laid down and gave up, like if all the Hawaiians just laid down and gave up, right? Then it could be slightly easier for some Hawaiians. It'll be easier to maybe keep your job as a policeman for the U.S. Empire in Hawaii, as a U.S. military personnel, as somebody working for a hotel, right? For the short term, right? But what do you be as a Hawaiian, like the failures of the Americans to address their parents' sins, like the failures of the British to address their sick, hierarchical, abusive parents and their civilization, right? Like, and before them, all the way back to the Romans and the Greeks, right? Every single failure. If we as Hawaiians fail to stand in what is pono, that what is righteous and just, to stand against this imperial colonial mass disinformation, mass violence-based system, right? Then we become complicit, like Americans, like Europeans, every one of their peoples collectively. Then we become a part. There's not a third option. Like, oh, I'm not for Palestine or Israel, I'm the third thing, right? This is what people like to claim. There isn't a third thing. You know, in the face of genocide, in the face of annihilation, it's really of everything ultimately, right? You choose to try to burn the sickness out of who you as a people, as a civilization, as a government are. You fight against that, and you set that on fire narratively. Most of what I'm doing is narrative, but obviously sometimes it's direct conflict, like with the Palestinians, you know, firing RPGs at Israelis in justified anti-colonial struggle, as the Chinese correctly pointed out. An armed struggle is a legitimate method, but sometimes it's just narrative, and sometimes it's just whatever method you have at your disposal, all and any means necessary. And if you don't, right, like Aaron Bushnell chose and another method of extreme communication, right? But if you don't choose to do that and you choose to be complicit and it's a choice, right? Then you are leaving that sickness. You are taking the mask off and going, it's just party time, and you're leaving it to someone else to try to deal with this ongoing plague that is spreading and like wildfire and getting much worse. And then the pandemic, that includes the pandemic. Choosing to say, well, it's hard. It's the same thing, right? Why do people take their masks off knowing scientifically that's not going to be very good for them? It's easy. It's the same reason why people take the easy way out in the West, right? It's easier. I don't have to have hard conversations with family and friends. I don't have to feel isolated by my sick, diseducated fellow members of society. And it benefits me personally because I can keep those relationships with these sick, literally sick people who have 6 rounds of COVID, measles and tuberculosis and RSV. And I can keep my job. I can keep going to my concerts and keep going to lunch and brunch. I can keep going to yoga class and all the things I do and pretend like it's 2019, right? Even though we're all getting sicker and deader and everyone's having brain damage and people are coughing everywhere like it's the freaking Black Plague. And I choose, you choose, everyone's choosing every day, right? Not to do the easier thing that is not address the sickness, right? And it makes your life easier, at least temporarily, a little bit easier until you get MECFS scale, extreme long COVID, and you can't move and think and walk, and you live like your body's on fire most of the day, and you can't even get up and cook your own food, or you need help taking a shit. And then oh shit, I should have taken COVID seriously. Right? But it's too late already because you've already done this. You've already done the Western sick, cowardly thing, right? So every day, everyone is choosing, right, whether to take that seriously, and it's harder. You're going to be ostracized when you go to class. People are going to look at you funny because you're wearing a mask. It's going to be hard to go to family get-togethers. But that's the hard thing, but it's the right thing, right? Or you can do the easy thing that personally benefits you, hurts everybody in the long term. But you don't care, right? But colonialism and imperialism is like that, right? You could lose your job at a university, company, government for speaking out for Palestine, right? As a Native Hawaiian, I lost jobs for talking about Hawaii and what the U.S. has done in Hawaii and its systems. I lost 2 separate jobs, right? It's gonna be harder. It's gonna be harder, right? Now it's not impossible, and like if you have some kind of mutual aid and some support systems outside of the Western capitalist colonial system, that can help you. But you can't pretend like, oh, well, there's an easy way to resist the empire, and you can have your cake and eat it too. Like you can resist empire, and it's gonna be real easy, and it's all gonna be hunky dory. No, it's gonna be like hard. Surviving capitalism and racism and colonialism sucks. Surviving that system and then trying to build a revolutionary struggle that has any success possibility, like that is as hard as surviving it and then some, right? And but also that is what you have to do. And so the question is, but then it's like, do you care about yourself? And are you a coward? Or do you care? Do you actually? A lot of people say, "Oh, I have for land back and indigenous people, and I'm a 7th-generational like deep time thinker." But are you though? Do you really care about the children's children? Or is it just YOLO and your life? And then, if you're not masking, you don't give a fuck about your children's because you're saying like, well, fuck them. I'm going to get everyone sick and then this world will fall apart for my personal benefit. Like everyone who isn't doing that. If you're like, well, I'm going to fly on this plane and go to Hawaii, then you don't, right? Because you're like, well, I'm going to burn all the carbon that I can. I'm not going to listen to indigenous people, and I'm going to be complicit in the colonialist capitalist system that wants me to fly to Hawaii and be an Israeli on Hawaiian land and participate in genocide, displacing, ethnically cleansing Native Hawaiians, right? So then you don't care about that. You're siding with your sick empire. Anyways, one last thing I wanted to bring up is speaking of education, right? Because I've been talking about how do you address these sick systems. Where is that? It was an article. I have so many links open, I can't find it. It was Uh, yeah. So there's this article about education, right? This goes back straight back to that, right? Have the liberal arts gone conservatives? I mean, now the New Yorker is a rag. It is a look at this Roman pencil that they have, Greco-Roman pencil. So I'm not saying that the New Yorker is a great source of information. I mean, I look at these to make sure I know what they're saying in the West, and what the liberal imperial ruling classes are saying. But I can't get in there. But anyway, this article, I'm not gonna give you the whole thing. I'll give you like some of what it says. Sorry, I gotta get somewhere where I can actually read this. I'm getting because of capitalism, I can't read documents. I can't get to the original documents, the original archaeological documents. I'm a U.S. UK Western expert on Western culture, but I can't get access to them because of capitalism. Give me one sec. I gotta close some. I got too many tabs open too. Okay. I'm just trying to get the actual text here. Yeah, Annals of Education. Have the liberal arts gone conservative? So I mean, you don't need to see this. I'm gonna turn this off for a second. Have the liberal arts gone conservative? The classical education movement seeks to fundamentally reorient schooling in America. It emphasizes morality and civics and has also primed it for partisan takeover. Hundreds of classical schools have opened in the United States in recent years. First thing you notice when walking into the middle school classrooms of Brilla Charter School Network in the South Bronx and obviously New York is the sense of calm. No phones are out. Students are quiet, not in the beaten down way of those under authoritarian rule, but in the way of those who seem genuinely interested in their work. Sixth graders participate in multi-day art project after studying great painters such as Matisse. Seventh graders prepare to debate whether parents should be punished for the crimes of their minor children. Another group of sixth graders holding a violin or a cello reads out notes from sheet music. A teacher cues them to play the lines pizzicato. They pluck strings in unison. Anyways, I'm just kind of like reading some of this article, but what it's talking about is the classical education movement, a fast-growing effort to fundamentally reorient schooling in America. Classical schools offer traditional liberal arts education focusing on Western canon and the study of citizenship. So there's a lot of bullshit around this. So you know what I'm reading is this is a star-spangled, unhealed descendant of Roman trauma, New Yorker author and edited by the worst people on the planet, the United States ruling class. So just take that with all the salt from an entire salt mine. Ideally not worked by enslaved Africans. But anyways, the classical approach, which prioritizes some ways of teaching that have been around for more than 2,000 years, is radically different from that of public schools, where what kids learn and how they learn it varies widely from district, school, and even classroom. In many public schools, kids learn to read by guessing words using context clues rather than by decoding the sounds of letters. In most classical schools, phonics reign. Students learn grammar by diagramming sentences. Some public schools have moved away from techniques like memorization, which education scholars knock as rote learning or drill and kill, the thing that's killed being a child's desire to learn. In contrast, classical schools prize memory work, asking students to internalize math formulas and recite poems. And then there's literature. The list includes graphic novels. Michelle Obama's New York Public High School has graphic novels. Michelle Obama's memoir, coming-of-age book about identity, featuring characters named Aristotle and Dante. In classical schools, high school students read Aristotle and Dante. Classical education has historically been prompted by religious institutions and expensive prep schools. Many classical schools have adopted the Harkness method by Phillips Exeter Academy, where, so the powerful investors have seen potential in cultivating academic excellence in underserved populations. The Charter School Growth Fund. Anyways, I don't want to read all this. This is all like propaganda. Bill and Melinda Gates and Bloomberg Philanthropies are trying to help your underserved populations. I know that spiel, as I used to work for nonprofits, disgusting entities in the West. Republican politicians have also smelled opportunity in the movement, billing traditionalism as an antidote to public school wokeism. As Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, railed against a concerted effort to inject this gender ideology into public school classrooms, as celebrated the influx of classical schools in his state. Tennessee's Governor Bill Lee proposed launching up to 100 classical charter schools statewide, touting their mission to preserve American liberty. As more conservatives have flocked to classical education, progressive academics have issued warnings about the movement, characterizing it as fundamentally Christian project that doesn't include or reflect the many kids in America who aren't white or who have roots outside the country. The educational scholar activist Diane Ravitch recently wrote that classical charters have become weapons of the right as they seek to destroy democratically governed public schools while turning back the clock of education and social progress by a century. So, anyway, but this is a lot. I'm not going to read the whole article, but you know, I mean, the basic thing I wanted to discuss. This is just one of many new initiatives, and the thing that's hidden in this article is this is liberal and this is conservative. This is Democrat and Republican across the board. Number one, even before this happened, the U.S. education system is abominable. 54% of adults cannot read above a 6th grade level before the pandemic. Now it's worse than that. Okay. The U.S. Western education is absolutely horrific, just in general. Okay, for many reasons, not just also because all the Western education system supports genocide in Palestine, is funded and operated by empire, and institutes colonial thinking, displaces Native Hawaiians. Like there's an endless list of reasons why all Western education is fundamentally massively sick. It's like it is what they're stormtrooper training facilities. That's what schools are in the West, right? Any kind, progressive, liberal, conservative, doesn't matter. My sister used to teach at a Hawaiian immersion school. It's an actual Hawaiian school. The United States defunded it and destroyed it. And we've only been in operation since the 1980s, by the way, right? But the reason why the United States got rid of the Hawaiian school is the same reason why they're trying to get rid of the woke, right? Woke is just short Republican speak for actual education that, like I was saying, addresses the sick origins and doesn't continue the lies of colonial education to produce more racist, capitalist, colonialist, imperialist stormtroopers with Excel spreadsheet characteristics or trigger pulling characteristics, right? But now it's not just Republican. This is also pointed out in this video, which is that by focusing on the Richard Spencers and the Ron DeSantis's, the people that are doing the book burning in conservative districts in the libraries wearing like Confederate flags, that hides the fact that the the Californian government, Democrats, they have never actually allowed, right, except for like rogue teachers, right? Every university, every Western university has been firing professors. Speaking about Palestine, any real professor who goes actually and discusses actual decolonization, except as some kind of very vague concept which is deeply mired in mountains of academic ease that nobody reads and nobody cares about, except for people who want tenure and to grease the palms of the neo-feudal imperial system for some kind of clout game in the book publishing industry. And make money, being close to the ruling classes of the intelligentsia, which you can never talk about actual colonialism, imperialism in a real serious way without jeopardizing your career in academia, education, anywhere, right? So the focusing on that takes away from, and it hides the fact that there is a constant war and a struggle, or it is a consolidation and imperial crushing of anyone who actually is against the colonial imperial United States and anti-indigenous, anti-black, anti-Palestinian United States, right, across the board in education. To the United States slipped up a little bit in the teens, and by not going into classrooms and basically firing and imprisoning and getting teachers in trouble, right, for teaching too much of the truth about U.S. slavery. That's why almost every state of the United States has very strict laws about not teaching the truth about the United States in the West, right? You can't make anything that could make a white child uncomfortable. What does that even mean? Right? Anything that parents might report. If a child comes home and asks their parent questions like, I heard the United States is committed horrible genocides across the United States, and African people were slaves, and I feel kind of bad for being a white child. If a child comes home to a parent anywhere in the United States, all 330 million, there are consequences that teachers have been and are continuing. People, like thousands and thousands of families are moving states. I mean, this is not even, we're not even talking about trans and LGBTQ plus people. We're just talking about education, right? People are leaving states every day by the thousands because maybe there will be less, colonialist, racist, capitalist education somewhere else. But the reality is everywhere in the United States is enforcing this. But it's not because like the United States got better. It just failed to address, right? The U.S. ruling classes have failed to address the problem of people getting an education. And that's why you're seeing the crackdown. That's why they're trying to ban TikTok. Because the reality is if enough people actually do what I'm saying and like learn the truth about all of world history and human history, who the United States is, who the West is, what the reality of the continued racist colonialism, the reality of what is happening in Palestine that is backed by all parties of the U.S. and all Western governments that are all absolutely corrupt, and it's all wrapped up in the colonialist capitalist system, right? There will finally be, right, a cleansing. There is not a guarantee, but there is a very, very high probability that finally the sins of the Greeks and Romans will finally be put to rest, and there will be a United States and a Canada that is not perfect, but is capable of mutually cooperating with China and Cuba and Africa and the rest of Asia, ASEAN, and the Pacific, and with their own indigenous peoples in an actually equal and just, healed human way, right? Which the ruling class is obviously the white supremacist capitalist ruling classes that dominate the fake democracy of the United States and Europe. They don't want that to happen, right? Wall Street doesn't want that to happen. The Dr. Strangeloves don't want that to happen. They want to keep Victoria Newlands and the Tony Blinkens. They want to keep playing planetary nuclear chess because it's fun. I don't know why they want to keep doing this. They're too bought into their RPG, right? They're too invested in the Dune game they think they're playing. I don't know what, whatever it is, right? They don't want to go to prison and lose their head. That's the real reason, right? Just most of the U.S. and the West would be executed or go to prison or be deeply punished for their horrible crimes because, let's be real. The West is just a dumpster bin for the worst of humanity. So they don't want to suffer whatever confluence of it, whatever it is, right? Right. There is an across the board push to bring, they're calling it, one of the reframings is it's classical education, where all you're reading is, again, Aristotle and Plato and the Romans and the British and the French and your American predecessors. You're reading them unquestioningly. It's unquestioning. There is no they're leaving that out. This is liberal. This is not conservative. This is liberal, right? This is the liberal attempt to bring Black and brown and Indian and Asians into a new America that has token diversity. It's like Disney representation, right? Which is to say, here's some Black and here's some Native and here's some Indian and here's some Asian, but we're all basically white American apple pie fucking baseball playing cowboy, rah America U.S. military personnel, right? That it's like Avengers. It's like 2010 Avengers level of Avengers reconsolidation of the empire, right? And that's what the classical education is for. I mean, because most of the certainly the 2010s Disney stuff, like some of the most recent stuff is starting to get a bit better, but like the you can be Black and you can be brown and you can be these other things, but you have to be eating your Aristotle Wheaties You have to drink your Socrates, Plato, Ovaltine. You have to have your Caesar salad. You have to have your British watercress and pinky out tea with all of the Jamaican and slave colony sugar on it. But we don't talk about the slaves. We're just reading, Shakespeare without discussing any of the colonialism, none of the black and none of the brown and none of the indigenous perspectives. We're just reading Shakespeare from inside a European perspective. We're just gonna read some John Galt. We're just gonna read some Milton. We're gonna read some Churchill, right? And we're gonna read that, and we're gonna eat that up, and we're gonna be black people who are basically white people, racist, colonialist, capitalist, and we don't even realize it. You can make them. It's called Kamala Harris. It's called Obama. Obama went to these schools. It's called Harvard. These are just Emperor Palpatine training facilities, and black people can go to them and be great. Obama was the worst emperor. He was the worst Caesar / Winston Churchill / Clinton. He was the worst war criminal to have ever lived. I would argue Obama, because he prolonged the U.S. empire another 20, 30 years at the height of the worst tumor the West has ever produced, called the United States. So that's why the skin color is not actually that important. In fact, if you're black or brown, that's the most dangerous thing, because it gives the Western cancer, the Western sickness, the opportunity to the black but white inside person, or the brown but white inside person, is the furin cleavage site on the SARS-CoV-2 virus. You know what I'm saying? It is the thing that makes it so virulent, because it can fake its way into all the cells, that makes COVID worse than a flu or another coronavirus, right? The black but white inside is why is what enabled the greatest collapse of Western capitalism that could have ended the capitalist system to prolong itself, right? The furin cleavage site was Obama, that said, hey, there's hope and change, though. Let's not look at the tens of trillions of dollars that are being stolen and given to the richest, most horrible, who committed the crimes that crashed the plane of the global economy, right? So, which is what the Romans did. They came out and said, you'll have bread and circuses, and just relax. And I'm sure that the denariuses will eventually regain in value. It's so anyway, but I'm like, this is like way off the top, but I wanted to say that. So obviously, I'm not just talking about Fallout, the TV show. But to the extent that Fallout is a criticism of the atomic age, the crass saccharine American culture, is about taking the piss out of the cowboys and everything else, then it is beneficial and positive in that sense. And it's also just funny and entertaining to me personally. As a native Hawaiian who was raised and forcefully Americanized, like in Obama, who is a child of an African, is descended from Africa, has been brainwashed into doing things that have horribly not impacted Africa and his ancestors' descendants in a really bad way. This is part of the work of myself. Not just like, you have to do this. Like, we all have to do this. Whatever. If you're speaking English, you are already raised in empire, whether you like it or not. Doesn't matter. What color you are. Hispanics, and Martin Sheen counted as white. And he chose for his own career to throw out his Estevez name, because right. But now it's like what constitutes. So that's why it's like anything that correctly reflects the United States and the West's reputation and doesn't glorify it and glamorize it, right? Which is not this new classical antiquities veritas education. It's definitely not the anti-woke Republican education, obviously. It's not PragerU, but it's also just not the normal Western American schooling, which produced all of the horrors that and the generations of the boomers and the Gen X and everything that we see today, right? It's not any of those. It's any the education system, but also the media system and also the information systems, which includes social media. It is a war in the sense that it's an informational it's an informational narrative psychological struggle over the minds of all of the people of the earth, right? Which is what it's always been, right? To bring them from that side of doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on their ancestors' crimes and their sins. And then sometimes it comes out as a military struggle, like what's happening in Palestine, the Red Sea, and all over the place. Now, sadly, hopefully not the U.S. versus China directly, because that's like nobody really wants that, except for some American business people who sadly run the West, so it's very dangerous. But but it's a struggle to like it involves letting go, and it involves like accepting that, oh my God, like my great grandparents wanted to nuke this freaking planet. Some of my generation was happy to nuke this planet to get rid of Asian people, different non-white people. Our current, Hillary Clinton, who has been in and around the government, and is currently still very much involved in the U.S. government, said that she would prefer the end of the world to a world where the U.S. isn't number one. And Fallout is a world in which China and Russia are at, they are two in competition, and like it shouldn't be inevitable that this horrible world of Fallout where everything dies comes about, right? But if Western people collect as a society, civilization, cannot, figure out how to get past that need to control, crush, dominate everything else, right? And, believe that that's possible, or believe that is inevitable, and that war doesn't change, or that colonialism and supremacy doesn't change, and conquest and might makes right doesn't change. Or B, that, and also B, that they're capable of it, which they're not. The West is not capable of it. If they can't get that through their white heads, or their enlightened heads, right? Then we're in a very bad place, because the reality is China is not going away. The multipolar world is not going away. Like again, I know I say this all the time, but that, like, they are the mega story. I mean, you can talk to anybody who knows what they're talking about. Like, they are the next. They are for 2,000. They were for 2,000 years the world's largest economy. For a brief, less than 200-year window, the British and then the Americans surpassed them, and now the Chinese are back on the top. Not because of like, oh, they're just so they believe themselves to be supreme, but it's just they're 1.4 billion people, and they have a very strong system of socialism with Chinese characteristics. And before that, they had the Chinese civilization state, the 3,500 years, that was very successful and didn't do colonialism and war and conquest and destruction, right? So which is just saying all of Western history is a lie, because if you believe that is inevitable and that was the pinnacle of humanity, you've just been lied to, right? So that's why teaching Western history from a Western perspective, right, whether it's a right or a liberal Western perspective, right, of just Greece, Rome, Britain, France, Spain, etc., that is child abuse, and that is a lie, and that is a disservice to humanity, and that is going to hurt your children, especially now, far more than however they will be uncomfortable learning that racism is a real thing, and about slavery, and about the history of Greece and Rome. I mean, whatever, like, oh, I feel bad because my great grandpa-daddy was from Europe and my grandpa was American, blah blah blah. Like, that's the fever that's cleaning out. Like that's the vaccine. That's your body's antibodies fighting out the sickness, right? You're gonna feel a little bit not good, for a little bit when you're vaccinated against Western a plague, brain plague, right? It's called Western history. You're gonna, oh my God, you mean that these people that I descended from did these horrible things? I mean, yes. I'm sorry. Try to not perpetuate that. Here's what you can do to support people that are the descendants of the people that were victimized by your great grandparents, right? And then that is literally the only possible way. Anything other than that
will result in increased suffering. I mean, because the world will move forward somehow, right? But to the extent that people still believe and don't accept those things, that is increasing the likelihood of nuclear war, increasing the likelihood of other kinds of war, is increasing the likelihood of imperial suppression, capitalist suppression, increasing the number of cop cities, how successful the cop cities are, how many people join the police and the U.S. military and go to Wall Street, which is people who have bought into those ideas. That is going to determine how hard it is for the planet and the people and all living things to survive in it in the next century, right? The quicker you clean out the rot, right? That's why 80,000 military personnel short is a victory. If the United States could be 100% short on its military recruitment, that is a massive, massive victory. That's not completely we're done. But then the United States has no capacity to enforce. The West has no capacity to enforce. Right? It's like taking all the SARS-CoV furin cleavage sites. It's like taking all of the teeth out of the Western dragon and all the Western monster. If it has no teeth to bite with, then it becomes very easy to put it down and then move on with the real problems. Like you still have to deal with climate change, you still have to deal with pandemic, you still have to deal with building infrastructure. You still have to solve real problems, right? But you won't have all these needless, Western human created problems to also deal with while you're trying to deal with the other actual problems. Anyways, I feel like I've said these things. I know I'm kind of saying the same thing. I want to end with this is the last thing, and then it's already 1:42, so I know I'm late, but I want to do this last bit because I've been talking about it a lot. I've been talking about it a lot with a bunch of friends, and I have so many tabs open that my entire computer is falling apart. My computer is falling apart like the flesh falling off of a ghoul's foot, unfortunately. So here is a constructed alphabet chart that explains how the West acquired written language. Speaking of setting your sick origin on fire, this is a alphabet chart that explains how the West acquired written language from super advanced indigenous people in Neofeud universe. The background, this background is from Neofeud 2. So now I haven't given you any Neofeud stuff on the YouTube channel for a bit, but this is I'm still working on Neofeud 2. But I'm gonna read you a little bit of this is some of the background from this. Okay, this is from a scientist entry, who created this diagram. Okay, so I'm not gonna say which scientist. Okay, I have been called a quack, a professional hoax artist, cast out by much of the archaeological community. The papyroglyph, as I've dubbed it, is inscribed with a Hebrew symbol invented 200 years before Christ. Yet, radiocarbon dates the papyrus to 3000 BCE, an impossibility that would shatter our understanding of the antiquities, like Galileo's heliocentric model. And like the Italian astronomer spitting in the eye of the Catholic Church, I have been placed in a sort of house arrest. But I was nearly executed for treason by the U.S. agents when I explained the Aleph was discovered in Athens, Rome, and London during the advancements of the Iron Age and written language, the aqueduct, the Industrial Revolution, respectively. Extraterrestrials can help erect Africa's pyramids, but my Western patrons draw the line at Aristotle, Caesar, and the Windsors being granted a cheat sheet. Valuing my head, I refrain from mentioning this inconvenient truth. So, anyways, so Neofeud 2 is about disrooting yourself and burning out the rot, disrooting yourself from sick Western narratives, right? One of them is that the African pyramids in Alien vs. Predator, and also the Cambodian and South American Great Ziggurats, all built by tribal big game prize hunting aliens as predators. In X-Men Apocalypse, built by super mutants. That's who built the pyramids. In Stargate, it's space. I mean, I do like the androgynous queer Raw character, but in Stargate, with starring James Spader, it is the great feats of Africa are done by space aliens, super space aliens, and obviously there is a long list, or mysteriously appeared, right? So whenever African, Asian, indigenous people, Pacific people, across the planet, whenever there's a people that have been wiped out by colonization or oppressed, right? Aliens have always come in and done the amazing things, because there's no possible way that a non-European, non-Western people could have ever achieved those, right? But in Neofeud 2, every advancement of Europeans, and from Greeks to Romans to British, French, Spanish, all of them, all the way to the Americans, every single advancement in the opposite direction was actually assisted by super advanced indigenous people. So Phoenician writing, which became later on all of the Western writing systems, English, etc. That was all a cheat sheet from super aliens, super indigenous people. The aqueduct, the Romans, they couldn't figure shit out. They're too busy training slaves, and they stole it from this other alien race with this Rosetta Stone of how to do that. Everything, the Industrial Revolution, that was all aliens. I'm sorry. But which actually makes sense, because the West stole everything they had without colonizing and stealing resources of wealth and minerals, and also ideas like the Constitution from the Iroquois, and of course the concept of meritocracy that they failed to implement, and the separation of powers from the Chinese civilization state, which the British did. That's where A levels come from. In fact, all of it is stolen. So this is actually just history, where a bunch of white people ripped everyone else off and pretend like it didn't happen, but then gave aliens and super mutants credit for all of the successes of the 90% of the global majority. So anyway, but that's just a little sneak peek of Neofeud 2. And that's the end. Don't forget, everything we do here is always supported by the sales of Neofeud, and of course Indigestar, and of course all the other games, and direct support through Ko-Fi. Ko-Fi.com/SilverSpook, and of course Patreon.com/Neofeud. And all of that does go to help us keep on doing the education that is about drawing out the poison, and also struggling here against the U.S. continued colonial occupation that continues to use our water, set us on fire in Lahaina, with increasing encroachments on Hawaiian land. Thousands of us remain homeless in Hawaii because of the United States and its capitalist racist system. Literally living on beaches and living on the street in Maui after being displaced. So if you'd like to support us to keep doing that work and not be homeless again in Hawaii, you can also support us through patreon.com/Neofeud. Already showed Neofeud is on Steam. You can also get Neofeud on itch.io for Windows, Mac, and Linux, and you can get Indigestar, Decolonators, and tons of other games. And Woman is a book by Holly, who was raised in right-wing evangelical Protestant Christianity. And Holly is an example of somebody whose ancestors came from the West into the so-called Canada, but who has gone through whatever processes of getting past that. Being a woman and being abused by the system, it makes it, you have definitely like good strong reasons to get past belief in your supremacy as a Western person. But Holly also wrote this entire book about from the perspective of Mary telling her side of the story in the Bible. And this book is also free, or you can support us by giving us some money when you pick it up. Also, you can follow at SilverSpookGames at Octagon.social, at SilverSpookGames at Mastodon.social, on Twitter at SilverSpookGuy. Don't follow literally Chad, who is saying the nuclear war is awesome and good and cool and totally gonna be fine and chill. Most people will survive. It's false. You can follow at SilverSpookGuy on Twitter, and you can follow SilverSpookGames minus the E in silver. And of course, Terminus Cyberstar is for cyberpunk RPG that I'm the content director and lead writer of. And of course, you can also follow Holly at the Tech Fairy. And Holly at the Tech Fairy is, of course, partner here at the Silver Spook Cooperative, and in marriage as well, producer and more for the Kate Nix Music and Variety Show, parent and caregiver to 2 Native Hawaiian children, writer, educator, sapphic queer person with actual chronic fatigue syndrome, and also mask wearing person, because that's what we got to do to keep everybody safe. And yeah, so thanks a lot for watching. Thanks to all of the Patreon patrons for your support. Without your support, it does become very difficult for us to keep doing this work. So thanks for your continued generous support. You know, I mean, nobody in the Western government, the corporations, or nonprofit world is going to give anyone any money to do the education people need. So we really need direct support. Otherwise, we can't do it. And the same thing for that all the other educators. Anyone that is really in the West doing education that people need, it's all through direct people supporting them through things like Patreon or just direct donations or like just it's really just really directly paying for what they're producing. Content, education, whatever you want to call it. Because there is not really another way to do it. Every other way can be gate kept and held. So it's really important to do support all your independent creators and journalists, etc. And until next time, keep your marriage policy, be excellent to each other, and we have a good rest of